after the last episode's crazy ending, it finally happened. The moment many viewers were quietly afraid of was when the second Dr. Grove started appearing around Agnes and the other girls. And honestly, I think the scene was even darker than people realize. Because what made the moment so disturbing was not only what Dr. Grove did, it was how normal the entire situation felt inside Gilead itself. Nobody screamed, nobody stopped him, nobody acted shocked. And that may secretly reveal one of the most horrifying truths about how Gilead actually controls women psychologically. Because when you really step back and analyze the scene carefully, it stops feeling like one creepy man abusing authority. Instead, it starts feeling like the series is exposing an entire system designed to make girls question their own instincts before questioning power. And once you connect the hidden clues from previous episodes, the scene becomes even more disturbing. Because honestly, the warning signs were always there. Dr. Grove represents more than one man. One of the biggest mistakes viewers can make is treating Dr. Grove like an isolated villain. Because authoritarian systems survive by making corruption feel individual instead of structural. They make people believe abuse is caused by bad people, instead of asking why the system protects those people in the first place. But the deeper you analyze Dr. Grove's role in the Testaments, the clearer it becomes that he represents something much larger than himself. Control disguised as care. Authority disguised as protection. That is why the scene feels so uncomfortable emotionally. Not just because of the touch itself, but because everybody around the situation behaves like it is routine, expected, normal. And honestly, that normalization may be the scariest part of the entire scene. Because Gilead constantly hides control underneath structure and ritual. Everything becomes institutionalized, even violations of personal boundaries, especially violations of personal boundaries. And once you realize that, the scene changes completely. Dr. Grove is not simply crossing a line personally. He is exercising power inside a culture where girls are conditioned to obey authority automatically, even when their instincts are telling them something feels wrong. Agnes' reaction quietly reveals the real horror. One detail I think viewers absolutely need to pay attention to is Agnes' reaction during the scene. Because Agnes does not react with immediate rebellion or anger. She reacts with discomfort, confusion, and hesitation. And honestly, that may be even more tragic. Because it reveals how deeply Gilead has conditioned girls psychologically. Think about it. Agnes has spent her entire life inside a world where authority figures are treated as morally unquestionable. Adults, especially male authority figures, are automatically framed as righteous because the system itself says they are. So when Dr. Grove makes her uncomfortable, Agnes immediately feels something is wrong emotionally. But she also hesitates internally. Why? Because Gilead trained her to distrust herself before distrusting authority. That is terrifying. And honestly, I think the show intentionally focuses on Agnes' emotional discomfort because it wants viewers to understand something important about authoritarian systems. The damage is not only physical, it is psychological conditioning. The system teaches victims to second-guess their own fear. Hulda's presence changes everything. Now, this is where the scene becomes even darker, because Hulda's being present changes the meaning completely. If Agnes experienced the moment alone, viewers could potentially interpret it as one isolated situation targeting one girl specifically. But Hulda being included suggests something much larger. Patterned behavior, routine access, normalized control. And honestly, that implication is horrifying. Because it raises terrifying questions. How many other girls experienced similar situations before Agnes and Hulda? How long has this been quietly happening underneath Gilead's structure? And perhaps the darkest question of all, how many adults already know this behavior exists and choose silence because the system itself depends on silence? That may be the hidden truth. The Testaments are slowly exposing now. Gilead does not simply control women through laws. It controls them psychologically, through learned helplessness, through emotional conditioning, through making girls feel like authority automatically owns access to them. Previous episodes quietly set this up. The terrifying thing is that this moment did not come out of nowhere. The clues were already there in previous episodes. And once you go back carefully, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Notice how often girls inside Gilead are observed, evaluated, discussed, measured. Even the language surrounding them constantly focuses on purity, obedience, fertility, and suitability. They are rarely treated like fully independent people. Instead, they are treated like future roles being prepared. Future wives, future mothers, future symbols of the regime. And honestly, that psychological framing matters enormously. Because once people stop seeing girls as individuals and start seeing them as functions, violations become easier to justify internally. That may be the darkest ideological truth underneath Gilead itself. Women are not viewed as fully autonomous human beings. They are viewed as resources belonging to the structure around them. And Dr. Grove may simply represent the moment where that reality becomes impossible for Agnes to ignore anymore. Why the scene feels so realistically disturbing. One reason this scene affects viewers so strongly is because the horror feels realistic. The Testaments does not portray evil here in an exaggerated or cartoonish way. Instead, the scene feels quiet, awkward, systemic, which honestly makes it much more disturbing emotionally. Dr. Grove does not act like a dramatic villain announcing evil intentions openly. Instead, the discomfort comes from subtle abuse of authority itself. That realism matters, because systems like Gilead rarely maintain control through non-stop visible violence alone. They survive through normalized violations people are taught not to question. That is why the atmosphere feels so suffocating during the scene. Everyone understands something feels wrong emotionally, but the structure around the girls discourages resistance before resistance can even form. And honestly, that helplessness may be exactly what the series wanted viewers to feel, because that same helplessness is what Gilead imposes on women constantly. Agnes may never see Gilead the same way again. I honestly think this scene may become a major turning point for Agnes moving forward, because moments like this destroy innocence permanently. Before now, Agnes still viewed parts of Gilead through confusion and inherited belief. But experiences like this force people to confront the gap between ideology and reality. Gilead claims to protect women. But does protection feel like fear? Does protection feel like discomfort? Does protection require girls to suppress their instincts whenever authority demands it? Those contradictions matter enormously, because authoritarian systems survive through emotional narratives. The moment those narratives stop matching reality, doubt begins spreading internally. And doubt is dangerous, especially among younger generations raised entirely inside the system. That may be why this scene matters so much long-term, not only because of what happened physically, but because of what it may awaken psychologically inside Agnes. Aunt Lydia's role makes the scene more complicated. Another fascinating part of this theory is how characters like Aunt Lydia complicate moments like this emotionally. Because Lydia clearly understands parts of Gilead's corruption more than most people do, which raises an uncomfortable question. Does Lydia already know men like Dr. Grove abuse authority this way? And if she does, why tolerate it? Honestly, I think the answer reveals something dark about survival inside authoritarian systems. People inside those systems often justify smaller evils to maintain larger stability. They convince themselves certain abuses are unfortunate but necessary for order. That moral compromise slowly corrupts everything around them. And Lydia increasingly feels like somebody trapped inside exactly that contradiction. Because deep down, she likely understands Gilead harms girls emotionally. But admitting the full truth would also mean admitting the system itself is fundamentally broken. The disturbing meaning behind the scene. So what does the scene with Dr. Grove truly mean underneath the surface? I think it reveals something terrifying about how Gilead functions day to day. The regime survives partly by teaching girls to suppress discomfort whenever authority demands obedience. That conditioning starts young. Long before adulthood, long before marriage, long before handmaid training, girls are taught obedience first. And once obedience becomes instinctive, exploitation becomes easier to hide inside the system itself. That is why the scene feels emotionally devastating. Because Agnes and Hulda are not simply facing one disturbing man. They are confronting the horrifying realization that the structure surrounding them may never truly protect them at all. After the last episode's ending, many viewers focused on how uncomfortable the scene with Dr. Grove felt emotionally. But honestly, the deeper horror may be what the moment reveals about Gilead itself. Dr. Grove represents more than individual corruption. He represents a world where authority automatically overrides female autonomy, a system where girls are conditioned to distrust their own instincts before questioning power. And once you connect the hidden clues from previous episodes, it becomes clear this reveal was quietly building for a long time. The evaluations, the surveillance, the obsession with purity and obedience, the way girls are constantly treated like future roles instead of human beings. This scene simply stripped away the illusion hiding underneath all of it. And honestly, Agnes may never emotionally belong to Gilead the same way again after what happened here.